Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Bridges of Belonging. I'm very excited to have this conversation today. This is conversation number 14, and my name is Andrea Carey. I'm the Chief Inclusion Officer with Inclusion Incorporated, and super excited to be able to profile and highlight our guests today, and we'll get to introducing them in just a moment. I do want to begin by acknowledging the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, the homes of the nations of the Esquimalt and Songhees people who have safeguarded this land for generations, and I've been really fortunate to be a guest here on this territory for the last 25 years, and especially over the last few months to have a safe place to be during COVID. And today, actually, it's a little bit smoky outside. We've got some winds blowing in from actually Washington State from the US, bringing some smoke. So that seemed like an apt way to tie in the quote for today. So I'm reading from Glennon Doyle's Untamed. And anyone who's read this book knows how special it is. And I think, Wanda, when you and I first spoke, I told you about this book. So the chapter I'm reading from is called Let It Burn. So I'm going to share about a page or so of Glennon's beautiful work. When we let ourselves feel, our inner self transforms. When we act upon our knowing and imagination, our outer worlds transform. Living from worlds within us will change our outer worlds. Here's the rub. Destruction is essential to construction. If we want to build the new, we must be willing to let the old burn. We must be committed to holding on to nothing but the truth. We must decide that if the truth inside us can burn a belief, a family structure, a business, a religion, an industry, it should have become ashes yesterday. If we feel, know, and imagine our lives, families, and world becoming truer versions of themselves, eventually. But at first, it's very scary because once we feel, know, and dare to imagine more for ourselves, we cannot unfeel, unknow, or unimagine. There is no going back. We are launched into the abyss, the space between the not true enough life we're living and the truer one that exists only inside of us. So we say, maybe it's safer to just stay here, even if it's not true enough. Maybe it's good enough. But good enough is what makes people drink too much and snark too much and become bitter and sick and live in quiet desperation until they lie on their deathbed and wonder, what kind of life, relationship, family, world might I have created if I'd been braver? The building of the true and beautiful means the destruction of the good enough. Rebirth means death. Once a truer, more beautiful vision is born inside of us, life is the direction of that vision. Holding on to what is no longer true enough is not safe. It's the riskiest move because there is the certain death of everything that was meant to be. We are alive only to the degree to which we are willing to be annihilated. Our next life will always cost us this one. If we are truly alive, we are constantly losing who we were, what we just built and what we just believed, what we just knew to be true. I have lost identities, beliefs, and relationships. It has hurt to lose. I have learned that when I live from my emotions, knowing in my imagination, I am always losing. What I lose is always what is no longer true enough so that I can fully take hold of what is. And that just seemed like perfect words for today and for the guests that we have today, because I know both of you just live with such passion and vibrance and take some of those leaps in your lives to make things happen for yourselves. So I'm really grateful to have both Wanda and Scout join us today. And I also have a special guest. Fanny Smith is here today, and Fanny's just going to do a quick announcement about an upcoming event that we have. And then we'll get to introducing our two guests. So over to Fanny.
Hi, thank you. So I'm Fanny Smith. My pronouns are she and her, and been working with Andrea for a little bit now on building Inclusion Incorporated and some of the conversations. And we're really excited to announce that nous commençons les conversations en français à partir du 30 septembre, favoriser l'appartenance. So we're going to bring you these conversations in French starting on September 30th. I did want to actually also acknowledge that I am in the beautiful Tsawwassen territory, First Nations territory, and I've been spending a lot of time this summer walking the beaches and being extremely grateful that we have taken such care of this land. Really excited to start these conversations in French. It'll be a very exciting way to be inclusive of all our great nation and French-speaking people across Canada and across the world. And our first guests on September 30th are going to be a great friend of mine and Paralympian Cindy Ouellette. Cindy is Paralympian in wheelchair basketball and is the first Quebecoise to have done both the Summer and Winter Games. And also Maxime Gagnon, who is the executive director of Défis Sportifs and Alter Ego in Quebec. So he has lots of experience working in sport inclusion, and we're very excited. So if you are bilingual on the call today, please join us for our first talk on September 30th. And if not, then please share with your French-speaking peers, and we look forward to bring that. I'm going to go off video, and if there's any questions for the guests, I will be taking notes, and we will be able to answer them at the end. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Fanny. And now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our two guests. So we have Scout Bassett joining us, and Scout is Team USA Paralympian and comes to visit us today from California. So great to have you join us, Scout. I'm so excited to have this conversation. Scout was born in China and had a chemical fire, lost her right leg at the age of 1.5. She was an orphan and ended up being adopted by a family in the US, which I'm sure she's going to tell us all about, and then got into sport and really found a path through sport and has been on the Paralympic team since the 2016 Games, and is currently training in California, and is not just a one-faceted athlete. You do many different sports, so I look forward to hearing about your journey through triathlon and athletics as we go forward, Scout. And our other guest is Wanda Duchamps, and Wanda is the founder and principal of Liberty & Co., which is a consultancy looking to advance meaningful social causes. She's been a champion for inclusivity with a focus on gender equity and neurodiversity, and is also the founder of Women for Women, really looking at how women can elevate each other. And she also started a virtual conversation on the National Day of Conversation about Sexual Harassment in the charitable sector. So both firecrackers, and I'm super excited to have this conversation with you. So Scout, we're going to turn it over to you to tell us a little bit more about yourself, and looking forward to sharing this journey of belonging with both of you.
Well, I am so excited to be part of this, and thank you so much for having me on. It's truly a great honor. As you know, you've told a little bit about my backstory, and so I'll just continue from there. I arrived in the US at almost 8 years old. I didn't speak a word of English and came to a small town of 1,600 people in northern Michigan. And right away, I realized that things were going to be quite challenging and different, because I came to an environment where of 1,600 people, I did not see people who looked like me. And I don't mean just Asian, but also having a disability. And I knew that I was going to be very different, and that was going to present a lot of challenges. And of course, getting involved in school right away was difficult, not only because I don't speak the language, but just being so different from everybody else, and having to explain my situation and where I come from and my experiences to peers and classmates who have just you know, no concept of that life and where I'd come from. And so I would say that as a child, I had a lot of struggles. You know, we talk about belonging here, and I would say that was probably one of my biggest hurdles. It wasn't just, most people think when they see me, like the biggest challenges probably are physical, you know, dealing with the disability. And I'm not saying that hasn't been hard, but honestly, like the things that have gone on internally and the struggles and the difficulties from a mental and emotional standpoint have been far greater challenges. And I think I never really felt as a kid that I felt a sense of belonging, just because this was a time where, you know, in this small town, it's a very homogenous and not a lot of diversity, and people sort of think in the same way, and they all look, they're all, pretty much all one race. And you know, I was often you know, bullied or just, you know, commented of how different I was. And, you know, of all the kids in the class, everybody would be invited to somebody's birthday party or the sleepover except for Scout. And I think also one of the challenges is that you know, I had come from such a traumatic situation, being in this orphanage and very isolated, not a place to express myself. And so coming here, I lacked self-confidence. I would say I didn't have any, and just not really knowing how to express myself, and lacking that confidence to really own my story and my experiences as a young girl, and also probably not at a place at that point in my life to really be able to talk about a lot of these experiences and the trauma. And so I think that's also what made it challenging in trying to fit in and to belong in this community. Was just, you know, part of it was me. It was just a lack of confidence. And anyway, sport was such a huge part of my life. I joined right away in about second grade, and I found out I was always welcome to be there. I could come to the games, I could come to the practices, but when it came to game day or tournaments, I was often left on the sidelines. In fact, there were many seasons of many years where I was the only person on the team that didn't get to play in a game or in a tournament. And again, probably not the best for somebody who already doesn't have a lot of confidence going through that kind of experience. But what it taught me is that a couple of things that I realized then, that was really my first exposure to understanding just the prejudice and a little bit of the discrimination that people with disabilities face. Because really, that was the only thing that kept me from playing and getting in the competition arena, was that I had a disability. And this was before the age of sports prosthetics, and so I was doing sports on my everyday walking leg, which is not made for sports or high performance. And so I struggled, but instead of looking for ways to include me or to involve me, most of the coaches just took the short, easy route of telling me that to sit on the bench, you know, or that, you know, we have to win games and we have to be competitive and put the best team out there. And so that was really my first understanding of, you know, just even at a level where, you know, this is not college, this is, nobody's making money doing this, that being an athlete with a disability was going to be challenging. But the other thing, and perhaps the most important thing it taught me, is that being involved in sport and showing up every season of every year, is that I've developed a strength and a determination that has lasted me a lifetime. And it takes tremendous courage to show up every day of every season of every year in an environment when you know you don't belong and you are not wanted, and to have that kind of determination and activism to just be there, that just gave me so many incredible tools that I've needed the rest of my life. And so anyways, I'll just wrap this up by saying that I went to college on a full scholarship to UCLA, academic scholarship, and that's where I discovered the Paralympics. So a little bit later on, and have competed, as Andrea said, in 2016 at the Rio Paralympics, and continuing to aim for next summer in Tokyo. And that's where I'm currently at. But I'm so excited about this and to share just, you know, some of my journey and a lot of the good, but also some of the really hard things. So thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Scout. What a great, vulnerable story to kick us off and just kind of set the tone for today's discussion. And, just want to acknowledge the traumas you've been through and how you've navigated those and shown up in a way that is like just dynamic and powerful and keeps others thinking about how they can keep persevering through challenges. So thank you for that. Wanda, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your background.
Thanks so much for the opportunity, and what a perfect segue you just gave me in saying to Scout that she's inspiring people to think about what they can do, because Scout, my mind's racing because of your comments, overcoming adversity, and just it's amazing. You see Paralympian, you see the headline, and you don't have a sense of the story behind it all. So thank you. And this is really interesting because I grew up in a small town in northeastern Nova Scotia. So Scout, about 12 to 14 hours from Boston. And I looked like everyone else.
Okay.
I didn't grow up like Scout did. From the outside looking in, I was part of this homogeneous community. And if you look at me today, you would say Wanda's like the mainstream population, and I'm not. I always felt like I was living my life on the outside looking in. I felt like I was different, and I was certainly treated like I was different. I was reminded that I was different because of my interests, because of the way I thought, because of my social interaction, my social communication. I spent my whole life wondering why, until I was diagnosed with autism at the age of almost 47. So almost 3 years ago to the day, actually. And this followed the diagnosis of our younger son, and our older son had been diagnosed with autism a few years prior. So I'm just double checking that we're okay in terms of technology here. Andrea, can you hear me?
Yep, I'm good.
Okay, I just had a concern there, so I just wanted to make sure. So I was just saying that at midlife, I came to find out why that, as I mentioned, I certainly looked like the mainstream, but why I never felt like I belonged to the mainstream. So how do I describe myself?
We lost you for 1 second.
Okay, so I describe myself now as an inclusion revolutionary. And I am dedicated, as Andrea mentioned, to increasing sense of inclusion with a focus on neurodiversity for the reasons I just shared, and gender equity, because
Oh, I think we lost Wanda. Looks like her picture's gone for a moment. So we'll maybe just keep going. And when she, oh, Wanda, we lost you for a minute.
Okay, I think I might move my location. I'm really sorry.
That's okay. Why don't you do that? And I'll maybe ask Scout a question, then we'll come back to you. Does that work?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So Scout, we'll circle back to you. You've talked a little bit about sort of that feeling of not belonging and, how isolating that was and how much you needed to persevere through that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the factors that led to you feeling like you did belong?
Yes, I would say a couple of things really helped me, and that is one, finding Paralympic sport, albeit it was a little bit later on in my life. I was in college when I found out about the Paralympics and first got involved in the program, and so that was I think the first time I really realized that there was a place for me. I didn't know anything about the Paralympics up until then. I didn't know that there was this stage for athletes with disabilities to compete at the highest level. And having always been a competitor, that was certainly a dream of mine. And so that really helped me. But I would also say, it's going to sound a little interesting to say this, but something that really helped me to find belonging was really just taking ownership of my story, my journey, my life, my experiences. And I know I'm gonna say that what helped me to do that was I've been through a lot of really hard things in my life, and this is something I don't think athletes in particular talk enough about, but that it's okay to not be okay, and that it's okay to seek help. And kind of when I was in college, I had gone through sort of this crossroads and this sort of you could say kind of breaking point, but my parents had gone through a really difficult divorce and a lot of fallout from that, and just, you know, had gone through some of my own personal experiences in college. And I just realized that at that point, like, I wasn't okay. And that really began the journey for me of getting, you know, help and therapy and working through a lot of the trauma and the experiences that I had as a young girl. And one thing I will say is that I've learned that if you avoid those things, you run from those things, because we're all affected, whether we realize it or not. They will manifest themselves in other ways in your life, in your future, until you're willing to confront them head on. And so for me, getting that help, working through the therapy, understanding how all of these things are connected, and to sort of who I am today, and whatever insecurities or doubts or fears that I have, taking ownership of that, and like really saying all these things have happened, and I'm not going to be embarrassed or ashamed of where I come from or of my journey, or a lot of things that you cannot change about yourself. And as soon as I started to really own those things and understand that, that's when I felt a sense of belonging. And it was because then I was secure in those things. And I think that a lot of times you cannot belong with other people or with other groups if you yourself do not feel that sense of security, of worth, and of value. And so I think that that's one of the most important things that's helped me. And I know that's a bit of an unusual answer, but they always say that, you know, you can't help other people or be that kind of friend or support for other people if you're not doing those things for yourself. And I truly understand what that means now, because, you know, having gone through that work, now I feel like I can go to any group or any environment and I'm proud of who I am. And, you know, whatever perceptions they have of me, I know that I belong because I know my worth. And that's the most important thing, I think, that you can realize about yourself.
Oh, wow. Yeah, discovering your own self-worth. What an incredible journey you've been on to get there, Scout. And thank you for sharing that, because I know, you know, that's something that certainly is part of the crux of having these conversations, is sort of recognizing what a journey that is, just to belong to yourself, and then to be able to put yourself out in the world in a very public forum, which you are definitely in. You have a massive following and are part of a pretty big ecosystem in your athletic space, but also as an athlete and as a champion and ambassador for many different products and brands. And you're kind of a big deal. So it's really impressive that you're able to you've been able to navigate all of that and do that hard work. So thank you for sharing. I'm going to circle back to Wanda and let her finish her introduction, and then I'll also ask her the same question around belonging.
Well, there's so many similarities because what I was touching on was one of the reasons I got involved in advocacy and sharing the story about women with autism as a woman with autism is because women with autism have differences from the mainstream, like all people with autism do. However, it can present differently in women, and that's because of our social constructs and barriers that society has created, because we have definitions about how women should behave and how women should present themselves. So what it means is exactly what you touched on, Scout, and that is women with autism, to cope and to try to fit in, do what is called masking. And that's actually hiding and suppressing their intuitive ways of communicating and actually trying to adopt forms of communication and approaches communication by that they see in other people or being demonstrated by other people. And so then all that does is create this tension and this very complicated situation of constantly suppressing your real self and adopting or trying to adopt characteristics and traits of other people in order to fit in. And ironically, it backfires. And you talked about the mental health issues related to the exclusion, and that is a reality for women with autism. And so my own personal circumstances, this all came to a climax for me in middle age. The reason why I sought a diagnosis is because I had a complete mental breakdown, and regrettably, this is what we see in so many women with autism. By the time of middle age, the buildup of that lifetime of masking is just very much presents in a downward spiral, and is just not sustainable. However, the good news is that once you make that commitment to be true to yourself, and whether you it's because you receive a diagnosis, a psychological diagnosis, or for other reasons, that you realize that no, you really need to commit to yourself first, and living your life as true to yourself and your own personality, or a combination of those, that's when things can really improve. And so that is what I'm focused on now, is neurodiversity, going beyond autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and really focusing on employment options, because the vast majority of people, regrettably, with varying abilities, whether those be visible or invisible, are either unemployed or underemployed. And that's not because we lack talent and skills. It's because we are viewed as lacking talent and skills and being viewed as less than, but that's what we're focused on changing.
That's powerful work, Wanda. Thank you for taking that on. I know that must be some incredibly heavy lifting as you kind of navigate your own story and work with others to create a better world for us all to go forward in. So thank you for that. I'm gonna, so Wanda, I'd asked Scout a little bit more about sort of times when she felt like she belonged and what were those facilitating factors. So you've talked a little bit about your journey, but tell us, like, what are some of those tangible pieces that really helped you move forward?
Yes, that is so important. Tangible pieces that really allowed me to move forward, the diagnosis. And so knowing that we're moving away from judgment. This is not, I don't like Wanda. Wanda does not like herself. This is, Wanda's neurology is different.
Oh, we've lost Wanda's voice again. Okay, we're gonna keep rolling. So Scout, I'm gonna flip you a new question. Oh, Wanda, you're kind of in and out a little bit. So I'm gonna just pause and go back to Scout. So Scout, you talked about sort of getting to a point where you could really accept yourself, and that helped you be able to put yourself out into the world. But how do you facilitate that sense of belonging for others? Like, you're such a role model and you're playing such a pivotal role in the Paralympic movement and in being an ambassador. So how do you kind of give back and help support others to feel like they belong, knowing that you've lived that very interesting story?
Gosh, and that's such a great question, and it's one of the things that I'm most proud of that I've done, I would say, with my life. More important and more proud than any medal or accomplishment is hopefully what I'm doing to help move this movement forward, but also being a real champion for athletes with disabilities and adoptees. I serve as a spokesperson for the Challenge Athletes Foundation. I'm going on I want to say 12 or 13. It's been over a decade, and we are a nonprofit that helps people with disabilities get the funding, the training, or the adaptive sports equipment to be able to compete in sports. So like a running prosthetic, which can start at, here in the US, at $15,000 and isn't covered by insurance companies. The Challenge Athletes Foundation provides that, or mentorship, or a training grant to be able to work with a coach, or maybe a competition grant to be able to compete at your national championship or some sort of regional competition. And so just it's knowing how important to have, well, first of all, those services and resources are not widely available for people with disabilities, and especially for those that want to be in sports or just to live a healthy lifestyle. And so I'm really proud of the work that we've done at CAF. In over 25 years, we've raised over $50 million for the foundation, and just have done life-changing work. But I think the most important thing that I'm really proud of is just the mentorship aspect, getting to connect with so many young kids, in particular young girls with disabilities, and helping them to understand and to navigate a world that has not always really made room for people like them. And just this last weekend, I was in Boise, Idaho, and I spent 4 or 5 days with a teenager who has Paralympic aspirations. She also has a disability, and she's also adopted from China. And I've known her since she was 6 years old, but she's going through that phase where she's really struggling in school. Like, she doesn't have a lot of friends, and she doesn't have a lot of self-confidence, and she's just having difficulty navigating that kind of space. And so just getting to spend one-on-one time with her and showing her that, you know, the most important things, even in high school, isn't how many Instagram followers or likes or your pictures, or how many, you know, how popular you are, but what you think of yourself and what are you committed to in your future, like focusing on your dreams and your goals. And I had just such an amazing, rich time with her, and I loved every second of it. But I get to do so much of that throughout the year, and I want them to know that the best way for them to belong, even if the people around them don't accept or aren't so welcoming of them, is for them to be themselves. And I think that's also a great way of how you get people to be more inclusive of you too. Not that it's their job, but that, you know, as soon as you take ownership and you are proud and you are living your life as your authentic self, and you are not ashamed or embarrassed of anything about you, I've noticed that it's also a great avenue for people to say, okay, she's proud of who she is. She's owning that. And you know what? I don't have anything to fear. I don't need to fear her disability or the fact that she's different or anything like that. And so those are the things that I really enjoy doing. And I hope will sort of be the legacy of creating more spaces in this world for people with disabilities.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like an amazing foundation. I think that's the foundation that you maybe got involved in parasport through. Is that right?
Yep, exactly. It's the foundation that gave me my first running leg, and that changed my life and really provided sport as an opportunity. Up until then, I didn't know that kids like me could even do sports because I had never seen it. And so I'm so grateful for CAF and showing me that, you know, I did belong just like all the other kids, and I can live a life as rich and as powerful and meaningful as anyone else, despite, you know, having a disability.
Oh my gosh, so many pieces. First of all, I'm really jealous that you're already traveling.
Well, yeah, well, we kept that a little bit on the DL.
Like, is that cool? No judgment though. Life-changing work, right? Um, and then, yeah, I also am like, oh my gosh, we need CAF in Canada. And I see Emily Glossop's on the call, and I'm sure she's probably thinking the same thing. So we'll have to circle back about how can we make that happen in Canada, because we need something like that up here.
Sure.
Yeah, so it'd be great to get connected and learn a little bit more about them. I'm going to flip it back to Wanda and ask Wanda the same question. So Wanda, can you tell us about a time, like how you facilitate belonging with others given your journey?
Yes. And backing up by what Scout said, so you asked about the tangible effects, and I was sharing about my own diagnosis, and then from a very objective perspective, coming to the understanding that this wasn't about liking or disliking or judging. My neurology is actually different from the mainstream, like the other members of the neurodiverse community. So once I came to that realization, and once I really took hold of my mental health, and so many things similar to what Scout has done, I ensured I had a circle of healthcare professionals who supported me, and threw myself into therapy and all the necessary protocols. What a difference. What a difference. People responded to me so differently because I accepted myself. And just like Scout said, it's not like you send a message to people, you know, saying, I really need your validation, I really need your approval. It is very different though, because people see that you accept yourself and you approve of yourself. And I'm looking at Mark's line here about showing up as your authentic self. And it's really incredible. Of course, I want to shout out to all the people who were there with me throughout my journey, different times, whether it's because we met at different times or because they're with me throughout. So there's always those people who are there with you. However, it is different when you're, whether it's starting your own business or moving into a different space, and you realize that you're really committed to you, and people respond to you differently. And so I am dedicated to neurodiverse employment. I have launched the Women for Women Collective, and it is about supporting other women. And the tagline is meeting you where you are, because I haven't always felt that women have necessarily been as supportive of each other as they could be. And as we look towards a future of gender equality, and we want to get there, I feel like we'll get there faster if women support other women. And the other piece, and of course, Women for Women is not limited to women members of the neurodiverse population. It includes members of the neurodiverse population, it includes all women. But I did want to highlight that part of my motivation as well is because the experience of women with autism is something that really needs a closer attention.
No, that's great. And certainly, you know, we know that as we sort of talk about different populations and different aspects of diversity, there's certainly different lifts and equity measures we need to undertake to ensure that folks all have the opportunities they need to be successful. So certainly a key part of the Bridges of Belonging conversations. So I'm going to flip it back. Actually, maybe I'll keep it Wanda to talk about you know, we've talked a little bit about each of your work around supporting folks to belong, but let's talk about women specifically for a minute. How do we really lift women up and support them, given that, women do often mask, or they've got additional responsibilities. There's lots of additional pieces that they're trying to navigate. So Wanda, why don't you kick us off with sort of how you think we lift each other?
It goes back to meeting you where you are. What I've heard from so many women, and what I have felt myself, is that women have supported other women, and certainly in the abstract. So if you ask another woman, do you support women? She's going to say yes, likely. And if you ask other women, have you supported Wanda? They're going to say, yes, I feel like I supported Wanda. Very few people are going to disagree in the abstract. However, when you start to peel it back and look at different arenas, look at politics, for instance, we're over 50% of the population. If women voted for other women, we would have parity, or we would be much closer to parity. If you look at some of the statistics around voting in Canada, women actually vote at a higher percentage of men. So who are they voting for? Charitable sector. 70% of the employee base is women, but 70% of the leadership base is men. So the 70% of the employee base is women. Who are they supporting to be leaders? Of course, it's not at the exclusion of men. Of course, we need men. But could we see 50-50? So these are the things that I'm inviting women to explore with me. So in politics, if there's a woman candidate, what are you doing to support her? I'm not talking about partisan lines. I'm talking about the fact that we have great women running for all parties. I'm not talking about necessarily in the charitable sector deciding before the interview process has come to its full completion that you're going to hire a woman. I'm talking about not being biased and not judging women in ways that we would never judge men. We do not talk about men's outward appearances in the ways that we often talk about other women. If a woman is not as confident as a speaker, are we criticizing her? Are we criticizing her because we're holding her to a certain standard that men can be very confident in their presentation? Or are we leaving room for individual styles that can be just as effective, but different? So again, it's not to the exclusion of men. It's about including everyone and thinking about female positivity, female focus, and female support with an emphasis on positivity so that we can reach gender equality. And Women for Women is for all women and all people who identify as women. Every race, every ethnicity, every religion, every sexual orientation, every geographic region, every sector, every educational level, every family style. And I always say when I talk about Women for Women, if anyone out there feels like they don't belong, I want to hear from you. And I want to hear from you why. And it has taken off in a way that I never, ever, ever could have imagined. And I think that speaks to two things: A, the need to support other women, and because so many women have said to me that they have not necessarily been supported by other women in the way that they had hoped or the way that could have been really helpful. But I see it changing, and that's really great to see.
Yeah, that's good news. Awesome. Okay, Scout, we're going to flip it back to you with that same question around how we lift other women up. And you gave us one great example earlier around sort of you playing that role model and supporting an individual young athlete. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about what your vision for that is and how we do that.
Well, first of all, I want to say, Wanda, the work that you're doing is just incredible. It's so needed. And in particular, I love what you're doing with employment, because here in the US, um, people with disabilities make up the largest unemployment group in our country. Now, obviously, this is not the case currently with COVID, but outside of COVID, they make up the largest unemployment group. And I've heard people say, well, they don't want to work, or they're not capable of doing the same job. And actually, in the US, a person with disability, an employer is allowed to pay a person with a disability below minimum wage for that job if they cannot perform or do that job to the same level as somebody without a disability. They are legally allowed to do that. So I think that's such an important work and amazing, because there's just so many misconceptions about people with disabilities and being able to work or being employable. And I think they bring so much to the table in their experiences, their perspective, and a unique skill set. So that's amazing. But as far as going back to this, one of my sort of inspirations, last year I read a book by Melinda Gates called The Moment of Lift. And if you haven't read it, in particular, women, I think you should absolutely add it to your reading list. It is so incredible. And my favorite quote from that book is when she says, "When you lift up women, you lift up humanity." And I thought that was like, I'm like, this is my mantra. I'm going to make this like my mission, because I think that's so true across society, across cultures. Like, if you lift up women, you are going to lift up humanity, because women really are such a, they make so many things happen in our world and in our society. And I really found this to be profound, because one of the things I noticed in, sports is my passion, the Paralympics. I started doing some research and working with the Women's Sports Foundation here in the US to do some research on, I've noticed that at the competitions and at the games, there were far fewer women than there were men. And I wanted the evidence to prove that. Like, are there less women? And to me, there seemed to be less sports available and less events. And sure enough, the data proved what I thought was true. And that's that of all the participants at the Paralympic Games, only 33% of them are women. Whereas at the Olympic Games, it's 50-50. And there are 38 fewer less events and sports for women in the Paralympics than there are for men. So why do the criteria and expectation of gender equality that govern non-Paralympic sports or able-bodied sports not apply to Paralympic sports? And so this really just kind of inspired this mission of working with my partners. I'm so lucky to be a part of an agency who the CEO is also the head of LA28, and working with him on, by LA28, we've got to see more parity for women in the Paralympics. There's got to be closer numbers of male and female representation, and we've got to have more equal opportunities for women to be involved in the Paralympics, and meaning more events and more sports for women. And so this just dream is sort of all colliding and working with these incredible partners and with LA28 to get that to be more equal. And also, I don't want to make any promises, but sort of my vision and my dream for the future is that we are going to see a future games where most, if not all, the sports will happen at one place at one time. So instead of having an Olympic Games and a Paralympic Games, them being 2 weeks apart, you've got the 6-week window. By the time the Paralympics shows up, people don't even care anymore. They're so tired and fatigued. Sponsors don't stay because they're not trying to stay for 6 weeks in a certain city or in a certain place. of seeing sort of this unified games, of having both the Olympics and the Paralympics happening at the same time. And so, that's sort of a goal and a mission we've talked about for LA 28, of having some of these sports happen at the same time as the Olympics. And I just think that that's a great message of equality, of unity. And if we truly are going to say that the Paralympics is parallel with the Olympics, we've got to have some of these sports and some of these events together. And so anyways, that's what I'm hoping. I think Wanda touched on this earlier, and it's so important. Women with disabilities are portrayed in entertainment and in media much differently than men. A big part of that is how harshly judged and women are on, from a bodily perfection, right? And then you add a component of a disability or something that's different about her, and we look at her very differently. And I'm just going to say, here in the States, when you look at entertainment, all the shows in media, men, first of all the characters with disabilities are mostly male, and they're portrayed as being heroic, transformer-like, honorable, courageous, brave, and we don't attach those same qualities to women with disabilities. It's that it's a deficiency. It's her weakness. And I really hope that everything that I'm doing and the things that I'm involved in is helping to change that for girls. Because like this girl that I was in Idaho with, she's made a similar comment of how, like, she feels like the world doesn't portray women with disabilities as being beautiful and powerful and brave and courageous. It's just like, well, why does she look like that? Or why doesn't she look as sexy or as pretty as somebody with two legs? And she just didn't understand that. And so, but I'm hoping that we're going to change that narrative, because I want the world to see that there is so much power and there's so much beauty and there's so much impact that can come from that. And your worth and your value is not determined by a disability or what you look like, but hopefully by what you're doing for others. And so those are just some of the things that I'm involved or doing.
Oh my gosh, amazing. And what, like, two perfect guests to talk about sort of the impact you're both having in the world, and putting out, your beliefs to become our future. And so, yeah, just so inspired and empowered by both of you and the work that you're doing. Scout, I just wanted to circle back a little bit on some of your comments around the Paralympics. We did get a comment from Jonathan in the chat box around Switzerland and their experience with badminton and para-badminton. But it's interesting because for those that are on the call, the International Paralympic Committee right now is going through a huge governance review and looking at how they're going to structure themselves going forward. Out of all these governance changes and all the pieces they're pushing forward, one was around gender equity. And that is the piece that got the biggest pushback, shockingly, because there's huge changes in how things are being structured around the world, and the gender equity is the one that's facing the biggest resistance. And so obviously a lot of work to do, a lot of convincing to do. And last night I was actually on a call with, we did a project with the America's Paralympic Nations last year, working with women in leadership. And I know, Scout, that's actually how we kind of met, was through some follow-up to that work. But we had all these incredible women as sort of a little reunion call last night. And yeah, I mean, the disparities that women continue to face in South and Central America is really startling compared to some of the challenges we're facing up here right now. So,
and it's not all that shocking, considering, if we talk about a trickle-down effect. First of all, a documentary that I think everybody should watch is a documentary called Rising Phoenix. It's about the Paralympics, the Paralympic movement. It's incredible. But the thing that I noticed that was the most glaring to me is what I've always known about the Paralympics. And first, this documentary features 3 middle-aged white men at the leadership of the Paralympics. Not a single female leadership voice. The only females that they feature in the documentary are a couple of the athletes. And that kind of didn't surprise me on when you look at that. And I'm not trying to be critical, but we do have to, part of being an advocate and a voice is calling a spade a spade. And what we see is that there's gender equity here in the Paralympics, partly I think because so much of the leadership is male leadership at the top. And I think that that's a real problem. And so it's interesting that you bring that up, because I've been sort of saying that for a while. It's like, why don't we have more females at the top of this major sports governing body? And why isn't there more diversity on their board and at the top level? Because you know, those are the people who make the decisions. They decide where the money is spent, where they're investing. And if you have men making all those decisions, guess what? It's probably not a priority of theirs to invest in women and to get more girls involved in the Paralympics and to create more sports and events for them. And so I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was the only, the documentary is incredible, but that was the only disappointment I had is, yeah, this kind of validates what we've sort of thought about the leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a phenomenal documentary. I would highly recommend that everyone watch it. So Rising Phoenix on Netflix. Yeah.
It's super.
And I just want to circle back as well to the book you mentioned. So that was Melinda Gates' Moment of Lift. Yeah, cool. So if you missed that, I can write that in the chat box as well. I'm actually going to get Fanny to write that in the chat box. So we are almost at time. So I'm going to get Wanda to give us a little wrap up comments and last thoughts, and then Scout will circle back to you, and then I'll wrap us up for the day.
There we go. I'm inviting everyone to join me in the Inclusion Revolution. Please follow the hashtag Inclusion Revolution. My life changed when I heard Caroline Casey and Paul Pullman talk from Davos at the World Economic Forum in 2019 and launching the initiative called the Valuable 500. And this is about disability employment. So this is about every person with varying abilities. There's 1.3 billion of us worldwide. Scout and I are 2 today, and perhaps there's other people here on the call as well. There's 1.3 billion of us around the world, and we are going to be employed at the optimum level so that we can contribute in a way that really plays to our skills and talents, and that really pushes our world forward. So join me in the Inclusion Revolution. If you hear about diversity and disability is not included in that conversation or is not on the agenda, ask that it be added, because disability is part of diversity and it is part of intersectionality, along with race, ethnicity, gender, and every other aspect of identity. And I hope everyone will follow Women for Women as well. Hashtag Women for Women, small W's, number 4. And that's men as well. And we have men for Women for Women, not hashtagged yet, but we have men for Women for Women. Because there's been so many men who said to me, I'm so bothered by women not supporting other women, and I want to know what I can do to help. And the final thing is another hashtag, NDOC 2020, National Day of Conversation about Sexual Harassment in the Charitable Sector, November 26th, NDOC 2020, Scout this morning. We just confirmed Tycee Williams from the US speaking, helping set the context. Why do we need a National Day of Conversation about sexual harassment in 2020? Tycee is the founding chair of the Association of Fundraising Professionals Women's Impact Initiative. And so I know this is a Canadian conversation, but we have support from our friends to the south, which is fantastic. So there, Andrea, I just gave everyone 3 hashtags.
Oh my gosh. Okay, put them in the chat box so that people can see them, and I will put them in the follow-up email that goes out later today. Scout, I'm going to flip it over to you for your wrap-up words.
Gosh, well, first of all, I'm so thankful to be part of this and to have met you, Wanda. You're incredible. Your work is amazing. I just am going to go back to, I know when I first sort of read that quote about in Melinda Gates's book, I was kind of like, wow, that's such a bold statement. And again, she wasn't going on the anti men train or anything, but she, in the book, she talks about how if you give women opportunities to go to school, to get an education, to have a family, to raise their kids, to that all these things, this trickle effect in society. And so often young girls from the very beginning are denied or told that they can't do XYZ. And I thought about that, how true that's been in my life as a young girl. I remember in 7th grade, I was kind of I grew up in I would say the kind of town that's not very inspiring. I'll just say that nicely. And I just had these bold dreams that I was gonna get out and sort of be different than everybody else. And I would, go and do something hopefully really great with my life. And I sort of just had these bold aspirations. And I remember telling my 7th grade teacher this, because here, the kind of town I grew up in is the kind of town where people never leave. You're born, you're raised, you marry the first person that you stare at longer than like 6 seconds. You have a kid by the time you're, right out of high school. And it just sort of this whole cycle. And I was like, I am not going to be that. Like, I'm going to do something with my life. And she told me, Scout, you need to know your limits. And I remember just being crushed hearing that. What do you mean I need to know my limits? And basically, and I asked her, I said, well, what do you mean by that? And she said, you need to know your limits because those things, those dreams aren't realistic. It's not possible. And I just remember going home and getting in my bathroom and just bawling my eyes out, because I was just so devastated to hear that somebody actually thought that way. And really what it was is that she thought they were impossible because she had never seen somebody do it. But that just gave me so much motivation, throughout my journey and my life of, being a trailblazer, of taking the uncharted path. And that's what I'm, on a mission to do. And, I hope that, I don't know what's going to happen after 2021. I don't have it all planned out, but I know I'm going to be involved in sport in some way. I know that I'm going to continue devoting my life to creating more opportunities for young girls with disabilities, because I want them to know that everything that they dream of, everything that they hope for, is possible for them, and that no one, they should never be denied a job, an opportunity, a goal, a dream, because they're a woman and because they have a disability. And so, we still have such a long ways to go here in the US. And I'm excited, to have met so many great people, including both of you, and looking forward to continuing that work.
Oh, amazing. Thank you. And I'm so grateful to have met both of you also. What a gift it is to have you join us and share your stories. And just, wow, both of you are making such a tremendous impact in the world. And it just makes me so motivated to go out and continue the work that I'm doing as well. And Scout, I grew up in a similar town, so I get it. We can't listen to the naysayers, right? They'll end up just being way behind us at the end of the day. So I am going to wrap us up. Thank you for sticking with us. I know it was a little bit, we went a little bit over time, so appreciate your patience with that. I do want to share our guests for September 22nd. Next up, we have Marny Abbott Peter, who is a multiple-time medalist in the Paralympics in the sport of wheelchair basketball, and now runs an incredible youth wheelchair basketball program that develops physical literacy for kids of all abilities and just introduces chairs as a normalized piece of sport equipment. but also loans out chairs to kids who need a sport chair so they can actually start participating in a meaningful way. And then Stuart Mcreynolds, who runs the Ability Center in Whitby, but is expanding across the country. And we had Emily on the call today, who's leading the charge with the Ability Center Ottawa, and they're doing some really incredible work at the Ability Center. And Stuart's an incredible human. Both of them are incredible humans, so super grateful to have them join us next. So thank you to Scout and Wanda. So appreciate it, and really looking forward to our next conversations, because I'm sure there will be many more. Stay safe, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and look forward to our next Journeys and Bridges of Belonging.